I have done today, I was going to have it open when we came in, and I opted not to so that you can see what a user could see. And I say could see because it's really up to you or the designer of the database as to what the end user is going to see. So we're going to double-click on this shortcut here. And notice that we are brought into what looks like a nice, friendly application, right? I've got a series of push buttons presented to me. Each push button is aptly named for the report or view that hides behind it. Nowhere do you see the database. What you're really looking at here is what I like to call the quote-unquote dashboard. Okay? What is the dashboard? For me and what I'm doing here, all it is, it's a simple access form that I've made look pretty, and I've thrown some buttons on it. And each of those buttons, when clicked, opens up. It does something. It calls to something in our database. It's calling to a report. It's called the material planning report, or maybe the planning grid. Or over to this far right-hand side, our customer sales report. Okay? It's calling to something underneath. So this is where I talk about the user interface or that dashboard. This is where we control the user's experience. We're not just throwing an Excel spreadsheet at them, and now they got to go out and refresh information and all that. We're actually giving you a number of different tools all wrapped up into one. We'll call access here the toolbox. Again, the database itself is hidden, and we're going to open that up in a little while, but I've opted to hide the database. And I believe if I recall correctly, I cover some of that in the recorded training session that I mentioned that you'll be able to see after we're done here. That said, again, it controls users' experience, and it minimizes their ability to tinker. Let's talk a little bit here first about reports. Now, note, again, simple button, simple point and click. And we're going to start over here on the far right with a report that is actually based off of some files that, if you're a Passport user, every one of you already has. If you've got the accounts receivable module, I'm hitting 2 files in your database that exist in your database today. Okay, and that is the customer file and the sales rep file. And what I did was I organized a simple sales report that said, look, organize it by sales rep and then customer within sales rep. And I want you to show me the customer's name, their number, and then we're going to get into a period-to-date, year-to-date, and last year's sales. And I've even had to go ahead and summarize that data for us for each of our sales reps. Seems like a reasonably complex report, doesn't it? No, the reality is it's not all that complex. And I think what we're going to do, if time allows at the tail end of this, we'll go through and I'll show you how you might be able to build something like this pretty quickly. This is a neat example where we have built this report, and in this case it is, I believe, a multi-page report. It is, and we've got some grand totals at the very bottom. So we have got quite a useful piece of information here. Honestly, it probably took me about 10 minutes to design this. I actually designed this yesterday for this presentation. It's not that hard once you know what you're doing. Of course, I'll tell you, everything's not that hard once you know what you're doing. I imagine brain surgery isn't that difficult once you know what the heck you're doing. This is an example, again, of a report, right? Now, notice when I click that button, I'm not asked anything because it's simply reaching out to our customers database or our customers table, and it's drawing some information out of that, our period-to-date, year-to-date, and last year sales numbers. And it's also linking in our sales rep table so that we can bring our sales rep's name in. Okay, fairly straightforward report to piece together. I don't need to prompt for data because those fields are already computed for us. Now, we're going to kind of move a little bit further into this, and we're going to look at another report. And you're going to note here that it's asking me for information now, right? It's asking me for a starting date. Well, that's because I've actually quoted in or added into my query some prompts. It's asking me to provide it with what I'm looking for. This allows us to build a nice dynamic reporting tool. So we don't have to go in and change parameters every time we want to rerun this. We click a button, off she goes, she grabs information and draws it in. So we're going to give it a date range. We're going to use 3/1/2012. We'll go through 12/31/2012. And now we have a report that provides us with some sales history by date, and I grouped them on month. My option. That's a neat thing. We can opt to do these things. I didn't have to. I grouped them on month, and then I believe we group on customer, if I remember right, underneath that. So you'll see for Elliott Enterprises, and that's the customer I use the most frequently in my databases. We can see what our sales numbers look like period by period by period, item by item, within the customer. even got some subtotals and so forth. So yet another example of how we can design a report, and in this case, prompt for information, so that we can actually allow the user some level of control over what they're seeing, okay, be it date ranges, item ranges, a specific number, a vendor, what have you. Going a little bit further, I'm only going to show this because we actually show this in another place in just a couple of minutes. I created a neat little material planning report for a customer some time back. Now, in the manufacturing system, we already have stuff like this, but this particular customer had some interesting things that they wanted to do within the material planning report and how they wanted to group things and so on. So we did this really simplistic material planning report that allows us to call out. And I even tell you up here exactly what it is I'm showing you. I added that into the header so that the user would know how we're figuring out what should show up on here and what shouldn't. It's actually a fairly complex report underneath in so much as how we're querying data, but to the user, it's a click of a button. Now, I show you that because we're going to start to build off of the reports here and talk a little bit about views, viewing information. I've got a few different views built into this application that will allow us to start to look at data more from a screen presentation perspective. And we're going to take a look at, I guess let's take a look at this one, right? Here's an item usage view. What am I looking at? Just essentially, we've reached out to the item master and created a form which tells it, look, I want to see the item number, description 1 and 2, and then give me some ordering rules, and this would be the manufacturing item, and give me some usage data. Okay? How can I get to the item I want to see? Well, I can scroll, or I can actually tell it what I'm looking for. And what's neat here is actually, we're going to do this one. We're going to go 7002. Note down here we've got some control. Do I want to match the field? Well, I don't want to match the whole field. I want to match any part of the field. Because with a numeric value, the way that data is stored in the raw form is with leading zeros. This is a 15-character part number. Because I have all numeric data, it's got leading zeros on it inside the file. Access sees those, recognizes them, and draws them in. I don't want to search on all those. I don't want to type them. So by putting in 7002, I can say, look, search any part of the field, search the start of the field. I can go after and dissect this thing how I'd like. Now, this means I can wildcard search things. I can go after a description and search for a single word and have it return all examples of that for me. I don't find the right one, click next, and next, and next, and next until I do. But the idea here is we start to share some of the information that's in the table or file, okay, just synonymous. And in this case, we see that we have some year-to-date usage for this particular part. We're going to go after our sales chart because what our sales chart allows us to do here, we were looking at the sales by date a couple minutes ago, is to hit the same query. And what we're going to do is we're going to go after the same information, but this time it's going to show us a chart. We actually built the chart here. So it now gives us information that shows that our sales by period, and it gives us some little hash marks to kind of break down so we can get an idea of what periods we're looking at. It shows us that our sales started up pretty well in March, dipped off, but then came way back towards the end of the year. Now, what if I want to see real numbers behind these? Just double-click on your grid, and it's going to bring up the actual monthly numbers that it's basing this off of underneath. So this is an example, and this isn't something I'm excellent at, but I'm the one who created this, so it gives you an idea that you don't have to be an expert to be able to pull some of this stuff off. Google will be your best friend when you start working with this stuff. But it shows us how we can start getting into creating some of those graphs that oftentimes ownership or top management really likes to see, because it can be a little bit more impactful when they're sitting down with investors or shareholders or whomever. It can be a little bit more impactful when they're seeing trends represented on a graph and so forth. So another thing I'm going to show you here is a planning grid. I talked about that material planning report. Well, this is kind of based off the same concept, but what I've done here is a little different. Same customer I created this for. This gives us the ability to actually drill into information underneath. This is what we would call a subform. By clicking on the plus symbol that was here, I've expanded this, and now I can see what sources I might get this particular thing from. So that's really what they were looking for, was give me a list of stuff that requires some action from me, and then let me click a button. I want to see where I can source it. So in this case, we have 4 vendors sourced against this particular item with their individual pricing from what we call their item source file. Same concept as the vendor item file in the purchasing module. Now, the reason I wanted to show you some of these things, not that you would so much, if you're not a manufacturer, you may not care about some of the data that's in the manufacturing system. The idea here is it's all data. We can go after it. Now, we're going to bring up this little vendor query, another quote-unquote lookup. And I want you to notice, I only have one lookup button here. I can look up by vendor number, but all I have to do is change the field I'm on, and I can then search based on the field that I'm currently in. So I'm going to click on vendor name. We're going to do a quick search. I'm going to search for VERM. We're going to, again, do any part of the field. We're going to tell it to find next. That finds Vermont Metal Products, which happens to be who I was looking for. So here we are. We're looking at Vermont Metal Products. I've opted to just pull in some basic information that I might need to contact my vendor, right? And that stuff would be like, who my contacts are, who's my primary, who's my secondary, what's their information. That's all great. But I actually did something along this lines for somebody at one point. What if I want to see some of the other things I have in my database, right? We scoot over here on our tab and we can open them up, and that's great. But I'm in here, I'm on the phone with my vendor. I want to look at usage on a particular item. He's asking me about something. Well, click on this little button I've added to the menu, and all it's doing is telling it, look, I want you to open that form. So it's opened up a form for me. Now I do my search again. We'll go after our 7001, finds our item. I cancel that, move back here, and now I can tell them, look, I bought 966 of these things this year. That's an awful lot. What can you do for me? So, I can start talking intelligently with them. So we can choose, again, and you'll see I've got navigation buttons built in as well as clicking on the X here. I'm going to move back. So from this one little form, I've actually created buttons to go after multiple things. Here's that material planning report. Again, the reason I showed it to you. So I can actually attack several, whatever, different other applications within the application, if you will, to be able to go after that information. So this starts to give you an idea of some of the things that we can do within Microsoft Access as it relates to doing some reporting or viewing of information. It also gives you kind of an idea of what you can start to do from the perspective of building a user interface. I'll share a real quick story with you, and then I'm going to open up the line for any general questions, and then we'll dive in for a few minutes, and I'll show you how some of this stuff works behind the hood or under the hood. That story is this. A client in Long Island really wanted to do some unique reports. He had an interesting one, so I said, look, we'll use that one as the training kickoff, right? So we got together online, and I showed him how to, I worked with him to build that first report. Showed him how it was done. We got it to the point where it was pulling everything he wanted, and it was pulling it into the report itself, but we had used the report wizard to generate the report off of our query, and it needed some cleanup. He needed to relay some things out, expand some fields, minimize some others, and that sort of thing. So I left him with that, and before we logged off for the day, I said, look, we'll get back together on Monday. This was like a Thursday. In the meantime, go ahead and clean up that report, and then we'll move on to, some other reports that he was looking to do. Well, I showed him real quick how to create that form and throw some push buttons on it so he could build his own little user interface. I get an email. I get in Monday morning. I get an email from him. He's flipping out because he can't do a computation, and he can't figure out why. So he's clearly working on something outside of the report that we were working on. So I call him up, and I'm like, slow down, man, slow down. So let's finish up that other one first, and then we'll get into this one. He says, oh, shoot, I finished that up a half hour after we got off the phone the other day. I've written 6 others. I'm on number 7 right now, and I'm running into a problem. So it was he just embraced it, and he started to think about some of the other things that he felt would make his life easier, and just attacked it. And he built it was a really neat user interface that he built for himself. And so, it's something that you can kind of make yours. And that's the beauty of it is you're no longer restricted to what's in my head and what I'm designing for you. You can start to open up the world and start getting at that information the way you want to see it.